Good morning, everybody. As you'll have gathered, my name is Donal Forde, and I've been working with the Irish Red Cross Society as its Secretary General for the last 4 years. And I should start by saying thank you to Sheila Norden for inviting me to speak today. And when she did, I was reaching a little bit, I guess trying to understand and establish what I might be able to contribute to the theme of the conference. And in conversation with Sheila, she reminded me of my past as if she needed to, and I suppose the relevance of it and the fact that in a number of ways it may give me a perspective that's valuable to you. And maybe I might just very briefly allude to that for a second. When I joined the Red Cross, which was 4 years ago, we were very much in the public eye, wrestling with governance difficulties and all that follows from that in terms of loss of trust and public confidence. Before that, I'd worked with AIB for 30 years, never very far from controversy. And in particular, I was part of an issue in 2004 that was a very public charging issue in AIB that had very serious reputational consequences. Later on, I was in a very senior position when the wheels came off so dramatically and so painfully. So I've been in the eye of the storm more than once. I've been at the Public Accounts Committee 3 times in my career with AIB, and once in my time with the Irish Red Cross. So each feeling like a public crucifixion and a public flogging, I might say. So it may seem to you that I'm a serial offender. And you're probably thinking to yourself, if that guy moves jobs, I'm not following him around. Yeah. And it's hardly a distinguished record by any manner of means, but it has given me a lot of exposure to the pain and difficulty that comes when reputation is damaged and eroded. And it's not as if there's any formula to deal with this. There isn't. But I'd like to think that the scars on my back have given me just a little bit of insight and just a little bit of experience at maybe how best to respond to these things. That's one reason, I think, why Sheila invited me to speak. There's a second, and it's this, that while I'm working within the sector for the last 4 years, and I'm very much one of you, and I've shared your pain for the last 12 months and more, I do think I still retain a strong outsider's perspective on the sector. And I think at times like this, when we're trying to restore the confidence and trust of people outside of the organisation, we have to start with their perspective of us, the issues that they may perceive, the concerns they may have. And I think I can help in that respect. So it's for those 2 reasons that I think I find myself here sharing my thoughts with you this morning. So turning back to what has happened, more particularly in the last 12 months, although not exclusively in that period, it has been something of a firestorm for all of us. And it's frightening, terrifying, I think, to be in situations where these things catch hold and they escalate, and they make life very, very difficult for all of us who are operating within the sector. But there's a pattern to the way these things happen. They start with a singular issue and the media seizes on it, and they do tend to sensationalise and they tend to dramatise. And I guess that's what they have to do to make it newsworthy. And then it sort of moves from the specific issue to something more general. And there's the suggestion that it's not just an isolated case, but actually there's a wider pattern. And the media sort of feeds this, I think, by finding other issues, and they may not be the same, but they're sort of represented under the same broad heading. And very soon there is this sense of a widespread problem. And it's frustrating, I think, for those of us within the sector, because oftentimes that reporting isn't always accurate. It's not always well researched. And I think the danger is that nobody outside of the sector would ever understand that you actually have to be close to the scene of the crime, so to speak, before you understand that it's maybe not being represented in absolutely truthful or accurate terms. Then our public representatives get in on the act, and they're jostling, as it were, to sort of be champions be public champions, and that adds fuel to the fire. And very soon this kind of unstoppable downward spiral seems to develop, and that's really classically what has happened to us, I think, in the last 12 months. And maybe I want to start by just reflecting for a moment on the way we respond to it within the sector, those of us who are working and who are caught up in that whirlwind as it is. I think we're hurt, we're upset, we're frustrated, angry. I'd even use the word infuriated. And you're infuriated at the inaccuracies of the story sometimes, the lack of balance that tends to come with it, the way everybody gets tarred with the same brush, And I think infuriated to see years of work begin to get compromised and get undermined. And I think some of us, there's even a deeper sort of human reaction. We feel hurt that our competence would be challenged, that our integrity be questioned, that our good work would be tainted. And I think our first response tends to be a defensive one, or somewhat defensive. We usually begin to distance ourselves from whoever's in the eye of the storm, and we say, not us, that's over there, nothing to do with us, not relevant. And I'm not saying that's inappropriate. In fact, it's very important at times like this to try to bring balance and proportion to the public debate, but perhaps not in a defensive way, and I'll come to that in a moment. And I just want to echo a message that has come from our previous speakers. We actually have a fantastic story to tell as a sector. I know of no other country of our size where there is such a breadth, diversity, and richness of charitable enterprise that goes on. And I'm not sure we've painted that picture just yet in as forceful and as compelling terms as we could. We need to refresh the understanding of the community that we serve and the public at large with respect to the value and the contribution that we make to Irish society. We're active in so many fields, doing wonderful work in communities, offering services that would not be provided if we weren't there, offering services in a way that government simply can't do, or doing them more effectively because we leverage off our volunteer networks and volunteer resources. So I want to start by saying I am a strong advocate of us adopting a more public and more visible position in trying to represent the good work of this fantastic sector and making sure that that's understood. I think that's a critically important step for us, and that work is underway, and Sheila and her colleagues and others are leading that effort for us. But, and here's the but, it is not enough. And I think the danger is that there are some of us here and within the sector who think that it is enough. And let me explain why I believe that. The difficulty for us now is that there is a doubt in the public mind. The cumulative impact of all that's happened in the last 12 months and maybe even before is that there are people out there who genuinely feel that there are issues of frailty, shortcoming, weakness, maybe even impropriety that are endemic in the sector. And we have to start by acknowledging that. And I think if we acknowledge that, then I think we have to be careful that our public response is framed in appreciation of that concern that there may be in the minds of some. And I think in framing our narrative and our message for the public, I think we each have to start by looking into our own conscience, as it were, looking at our own organisations and looking at every aspect of the way we do our business and we perform our activities. Because I think when we do that, what we do find is that, yeah, actually, there are things we could do better. There are things that need attention. And I'm not for a minute suggesting we're in a bad place. Some of us are in a very good place. But I think we're all on a journey. We're on a journey where, yeah, there are things we're happy with, but there are other areas that need our attention, do need to be developed, do need to be improved. And I think our narrative for the public does have to reflect that strongly. And that's very much been our story within the Irish Red Cross. 4 years ago, after all of our difficulties, we initiated a very extensive programme of work. And we've had to overhaul our governance systems, our supervisory systems, our constitution, our strategy. We've had to introduce policies, procedures, processes, financial reviews, audits, you name it. We've been busy. And I suppose the sum of all of that has left the organisation in a far, far better place. And thankfully, we have regained the trust and the confidence of our stakeholders. But are we in a position of absolute security? Is any one of us in a position of absolute security? I'm very conscious there's always work to be done, and there's always areas that you can identify that need attention. So our story and our narrative has been, along the way, much done, more to do. I think that's my phone.
Will we answer it?
I think it's best not. Forgive me. So that's been our story in the Red Cross, and I think that has served us well because it has been an honest statement of where we are. And I guess I'm making reference to it simply to suggest that I think that's the narrative that as a sector we have to adopt. By all means, let's represent the work that we do. Let's refresh the public understanding and appreciation of the value that we create. But let's do it, I think, in a way that's nuanced and careful and acknowledges that we all, I think, still have some areas for improvement, and that has to be part of our story. I'm going to develop that, and I'm going to be a little bit provocative with a small p for a few minutes, and I'm just going to suggest what might be some of those areas when we, as I've said, examine our conscience that might concern us a little bit. And maybe I'd start with what for me is the biggest question. Do we spend the money that we get wisely and effectively? Do we spend the money we get wisely and effectively? And I can feel a few of you bristle already, and you're saying, geez, we run our organizations on a shoestring with minimal expense. And you're right, and I've no doubt that's the case. But what if I frame the question a little differently? And I say to you, are you making the greatest possible impact on the community and the people that we serve? Are we doing the very best and with greatest efficiency with the money that's given us? Are we measuring the impact of what we do? Are we taking heed of the feedback we get from those measurements and that evaluation? Do we refocus our efforts on the most needy? Do we redirect our priorities? Are we really doing what our donors think we're doing and understand that we're doing? Are we achieving the very best impact we could for the money that's given us? That's a big question. And I sort of, on occasions, challenge myself by asking, well, what if the Controller and Auditor General was to be left loose in our organisation or in yours for a week, and he or she had unfettered access to everything we do? At what conclusion would they arrive at? Would we be so confident that they might say, yes, indeed, you've achieved that standard? And I'm not even sure it's a question that we're hugely comfortable with. And let me just develop that for a moment. We're all very passionate about what we do. We're each hugely committed to the cause that is the focus of our efforts day to day. But on occasions, I would suggest it can lead us to be a small bit obsessive. And there are times, and I feel, we've a tendency to feel a certain entitlement, small e, to the funding that we get. And I think that's a very dangerous mentality for us to have in the times we live in. There's nothing today, by way of any sort of financial accountability, that's beyond scrutiny. It's true of every aspect of public monies, every aspect of private monies, every aspect of your own domestic budget. So can we, for a minute, expect to be in any different position? We can't. We're entrusted with money which others have given us. We have to be able to demonstrate that we're making the greatest possible use of it. We have to be able to validate for those people who gave us the money that they made the right choice. And I think that type of scrutiny is going to be much, much more the order of the day from here on out. And my question is, are we ready for that? Are we comfortable with it? Are we in a position to respond to it? And will we respond in a way that will sustain trust and confidence? A related question, more practical one. Do we manage the day-to-day financial affairs of our enterprises and our activities? Do we manage them to the high standard that's expected of us? Have we adopted the provisions of the fundraising principles? Do we abide by them in simple things like cash, collections, receipts, expenditure? Do we do that consistently, day in, day out, in every aspect of our activity? If you move to the other end of the spectrum, do we produce financial reports that are up to standard? Do we satisfy our stakeholders that we've taken all the precautions and all the safeguards that we should? And the expectations of us around these things are only becoming more onerous, and will continue to be so. And they're not easily satisfied. Every one of us has to maintain a quotary of professional expertise, financial expertise that's costly to be able to support these requirements. As I've said, it's an obligation that's getting ever more onerous. And for those of us that have a substantial volunteer input into our activities or a strong volunteering culture, I think there's an added difficulty, and it is the question of enforcing these standards. Volunteers are the lifeblood of my organisation, and I'm sure for many of you, we wouldn't exist, we wouldn't be able to do the wonderful work we do without them. But you can't be as demanding are as uncompromising with a volunteer as you can be with a paid employee. And for me, there's a conflict in terms of volunteerism and all that it brings to our organisations, but at the same time, the rigorous financial accountability and compliance that's now the order of the day for us. That's not an easy balance, and I would suggest many of us are struggling with that. And my question would be the same. What if the Controller and Auditor General was to be left loose for a week, to have unfettered access to everything we do, look at our financial affairs in every dimension of them, would they report back that our stakeholders can have absolute confidence in everything we do? Again, I would suggest a big question. If I turn for a minute to the very topical question of senior pay and compensation, do all of us in the room make details of that available publicly, transparently, openly to our stakeholders? That's just the first step. Because what's really needed with respect to matters like that is that the board has given thought, consideration to the requirements of those jobs, has evaluated them, has benchmarked them, and has made a determination as to what the appropriate level of pay is. And importantly, that the chairperson of the board is prepared to stand up and defend the outcome of that process. When I hear CEOs going out to defend their own pay, that's a mad scenario. That makes no sense. That's for the chairperson of the board. And they can only do so with credibility if they have that kind of rigorous process underpinning the decision that they have made. So how many of us, I wonder, would be able to tick all those boxes? Another and overarching question. Do we have the level of competence and expertise at board level that we need to be able to steer the ship safely, in the troubled waters that come with operating in the public eye? Has your board adopted the governance code? Has it looked at any elements of shortcoming or weakness against it and set itself a path to resolve them? We need people at board level that can support us in the work that we do. Of course, that's necessary. But we need people also who have some insight, wisdom, expertise that can look to the horizon in terms of the challenges that may be coming our way and be able to anticipate some of those difficulties. Do we have the right balance at board level? You need people with internal, intimate experience of what you do. They make an important contribution, but you need others who can be cold, detached, objective, can challenge the status quo. And you need both constituencies in equal number, not a board that's dominated by one or the other. Do we have the mix of skills around the table that can analyse and challenge issues from all the various perspectives that are required? In the final analysis, the performance of any enterprise is going to be a direct function of the quality and leadership and guidance it gets at board level. I have been part of a situation where that failed and failed abjectly with horrible consequences. And I would suggest to you that each of us should be concerned with that question. We should be asking ourselves if we have that competence and that depth and that expertise around our table that's going to give us the leadership and direction that we need. So, 4 questions I've just asked. Do we spend the money we get as wisely and effectively as we possibly could? Can we say that our financial management processes and governance within our organisations are of the standard that is required of us, that would give confidence to our stakeholders? Do we manage matters of pay and performance with the openness and transparency that's expected of us? And do we have people around the table that can anticipate problems and issues and guide a safe course for us through them? I'm not asking all of those to suggest for a minute that we have a host of problems. I'm raising them to make a different point. I don't think we can afford to be complacent. Of course there are issues that many of us will continue to work on, where there's need for improvement, where there's room to do a little better. And if we are concerned collectively with the reputation of the sector as a whole, if we want to make sure that we can restore it to its proper standing and sustain it, well, that starts with each and every one of us. That can only happen at this sector level if it's first true at organisation level for every one of us. Each of us has a responsibility to the other to make sure that we're working on each of these points, and that our organisation, if it has issues that need attention, that they're getting those attention in a fashion that they don't develop later into an issue of reputation for us and for the sector as a whole. So let me just try and summarise all of that as succinctly as I can. Given my painful background, if I was asked what we should be doing now, I would say it's a twin-track approach. The first is, to borrow the phrase earlier on, we need to refresh the public understanding and appreciation of the fantastic work that's done. There's a messaging job to be done, there's a public relations job to be done, and I know that's already started, and Sheila and her colleagues and others are working at it for us. It's not just for them, that has to be done by all of us. Each of us has to reach out to our own circle of stakeholders, each of us bringing the message, and I would say the message has to have 3 dimensions to it. The first is just the enormous contribution we make as a sector, the huge value that we contribute to every walk of life, many walks of life in Irish society, and indeed to needy causes abroad. We have a fantastic story to tell, let's tell it, and let's make sure there's that rounded appreciation of the sector in the first instance. It's the first theme. The second one is, we do acknowledge the need for openness, for transparency, for accountability, to deliver value for money. We're not in a bad place, but we're all determined to reach the very, very high standards that are legitimately expected of us, and we're going to commit ourselves to that, and we're on that journey. That should be our second public theme. And our third one should be this. We have a wonderful opportunity now that we have a governance code, we have fundraising principles, we have clarity about financial and accounting standards, and we now have a charities regulator. Our message should be that we're going to embrace every one of them warmly and enthusiastically, and we're going to use them to validate and demonstrate the progress that we're making. Every one of those can be used as a milestone on that journey that I'm talking about, and one we take off for our organisation. That for me would be the public messaging with those 3 themes that we should be about. But the second track is the more important. Every one of us should be looking at our own organisation. We should be adopting the governance code, the fundraising principles, proper financial standards. We should be looking to make sure that under the issue of transparency or accountability or reporting of any description, that we're in time, if not now, going to be up to the standards that are required of us. And we should weave the issues, all the issues that fall out of that analysis, into a body of work, put timelines on it, and commit ourselves to it purposefully and energetically so. And I've no doubt that that's the right approach, and I'm going to leave you with 3 reasons why it's the right approach. In the first instance, because it reflects honestly and truthfully where we are. The honesty of our commitment, the honesty of our position, and a genuine commitment to move it on from here. And you make a huge leap, I think, in terms of reclaiming public trust when you start with an honest evaluation and appraisal of where you stand. That'd be the first reason. The second one is, we're all concerned right now with restoring and rebuilding confidence and trust. But actually, the bigger challenge is to retain it when you get there, and we will get there. But there will be issues in the charity sector again in the future, notwithstanding our best efforts. And when that happens, our safety net, our antidote for that, is to be able to point to the consistent achievement, a track record of achieving the standards, high standards that we've set for ourselves in the various codes that I've talked about. If we can point to achieving those on the part of the broad mass and majority of people in the sector, that's going to be a very important security, a very important safety net when something goes wrong. Last reason, for me, is the most compelling of all. I've stood here for 20 minutes talking about things that we should be doing, areas for improvement. And I'm offering all those in some respects as something that's just about restoring public trust and restoring public confidence and all else. But isn't the truth of it that we should be doing all of those things anyway? Isn't every one of the things I've talked about, aren't they simply a means by which every one of our organisations can be more effective at the work we do, more effective in reaching out and servicing vulnerable people and marginalised groups? And I think if we think of it in that way, and if we stop thinking of it in compliance and that sort of narrow terms, and instead we see it as a means of doing things better, being more effective, more productive, more efficient, more focused, more responsive, better managed, better organised. If we think of it in those terms, I don't think there's anybody in the room that could argue with that logic. Thank you very much.